There's only 24 hours in a day. I got a pair of earbuds and I wish there was a way that I could know just what I want to listen to. There's 150,000 shows that I'm not sitting through. When the world is dark and boring, let us do your exploring. Pod on pod. Pod on pod.
Welcome to Pod on Pod, a guide to the world of podcasts because it's not your daddy's radio. We're your hosts.
I'm Josh.
I'm Joel, and this week on Pod on Pod, we are not reviewing a podcast. No, my friends. Generally on Pod, you'll show up here Wednesdays, and we'll have a new review for you as we discuss a different podcast, breaking it down, talking about audio quality, host likability, production values, and the content itself to help you find your next favorite show. But today is the beginning, it's not the beginning. We're in the middle of March now, but we figured it was time for us to play a little March Madness.
And I feel like while we may not be reviewing a podcast this week, I feel like we're really going to be reviewing each other.
Yeah. Well, I think we will be helping you. If you haven't gone back and listened to all of our past reviews, this will be a good episode for you to use to judge our tastes against your own and use that to help better inform yourself based on our reviews in the future. What we're going to do is we've ranked the last 28 podcasts. That's what we did since our last revisited episode. We've reviewed 28 podcasts, or we've talked about them because we've done 2 trifecta episodes, so we had some extra shows in there. 28 episodes, or 28 podcasts, and we added to that the top 4 shows based on our rankings from the previous set. And so those shows that we brought over were WTF with Mark Maron, What Say You, Stuff You Should Know, and Mabim. That's right. My Brother and Me.
No. Mabim
was in this ranking. Yeah. So what was the other show?
Welcome to Night Val.
Indeed. Yeah, so the shows we brought over from the first generation or the first iteration of Pod on Pod were Welcome to Night Vale, Stuff You Should Know, What Say You, and WTF with Mark Maron. All right, so what we did was we ranked these individually, and then I used those 2 rankings, my list and your list. I used those rankings to put these into a 32-team bracket, and we're going to have that in the show notes as well. You bracketologists, if you are a real mathematician or a statistician or something, you might look at my rankings and go, some of these don't work out exactly with your individual ranking lists. I tried to go for interesting matchups, at least in the middle. I got the top right, I got the bottom right. In the middle, I went for interesting matchups.
Yeah, and as I was filling out my bracket, I had some teams that I ranked lower actually beat some of the pods I rated higher. I
did as well. Interesting things went as we went through the bracket. So what we're going to do is...
It was a cool exercise to do.
Do you want to go only on one side, or you want to go with the top seeds and then go around?
Let's do one side and get that
one whole side of the bracket. All right.
Yeah, and then the other side for the other champion and see who wins at the end.
So we'll go ahead and tell you our top 4 seeds were Mabim, My Brother and Me, the Serial Podcast, No Such Thing as a Fish, and Stuff You Should Know. Those are our top 4 seeds. So let's start with the Mabim bracket, okay? So Mabim came up against, in the first outing, Entrepreneur on Fire. From our most recent trifecta, the Productivity Podcast. I'm afraid that guy didn't stand a chance. The Entrepreneur is out of here. The McElroy brothers reign supreme.
Well, here's the issue that I came up with. I also picked Mabim, but here's why. That's a team that have been together for years. You can't beat that teamwork. Sure, Entrepreneur on Fire is rarely a one-man show. He always has guests, but it's generally different people. He's got to come up with new chemistry every time he's got a show with a guest, and it just doesn't always work. So for me, Mabim takes this one.
The bottom of that bracket is Stuff You Missed in History, facing off against Angry History. You may say foul play, since these two actually faced off against each other in the trifecta episode. But I think this actually makes sense. They're both good shows in their own right, as we discussed during the show. But for me, the one that stuck around, the one that I'm still listening to, is Stuff You Missed in History class.
I agree 100%.
So let's move up that bracket. TLDR facing off against The Art of Manliness. I think both of us had one of these shows ranked pretty lowly, and both of us have one of them ranked pretty highly. You had Art of Manliness ranked pretty highly. It's down in the 20s on my list. TLDR ranked pretty highly for me. Not so highly for you, but higher than its sort of cousin Reply All.
Yes.
I'm assuming that you moved Art of Manliness forward in your bracket?
On my bracket, Art of Manliness did move forward.
Here's the deal. I got to tell you, I'm not going to argue with you here.
And it wasn't even a hard decision for me to make.
TLDR went forward in my bracket, but I'm okay with giving that decision to Art of Manliness. I've got to write these down as I go.
I'm letting you know, just because you made that concession doesn't mean I'll do the same for Reply All.
All right, fine, fair enough.
Because it's like this. I know you have an affinity for that show. Like, it's your type of show. It's something that you dig. But for the listeners out there, I feel like they're going to get way more out of the Art of Manliness. I feel like you get stuff out of that show.
Last matchup in this bracket, the Weekly Planet podcast. It was my number one overall podcast. You had it at about 14, I think. Weekly Planet faces off against Blurry Photos. Blurry Photos was quite a while back, so if you've missed that review, interesting show. They go through the weird world of... well, now I can't. What is it? Cryptozoology. That's it. I knew there was I knew it meant secret. Yeah. There you go. Hidden zoology, cryptozoology. They're talking about like the Yeti and Loch Ness Monster and things like that. In my bracket, I think it's pretty obvious the Weekly Planet moved forward. What about you?
You may be surprised it did not move forward in my bracket. I picked Blurry Photos.
Really? You'd take Blurry Photos over the Weekly Planet?
I like the Weekly Planet, but I felt like this one was ripe for an upset. Look, in our combined bracket that we're going to put out, I'm okay moving forward Weekly Planet.
Okay.
You can move it forward.
I was going to say, the Weekly Planet's got to win that one. Now, the next step, I think, where I took my bracket, you're not going to agree with. But let's go to the other side of the bracket. Let's start with Serial over on the east side. Serial.
They got a pretty easy matchup.
Indeed. Taking on the Dog Thoughts podcast. Good guys. Nice work they're doing over there, but it can't match the behemoth that is. Serial's like the Mike Tyson of podcasting right now.
It was definitely. I wonder how many sports cliches we can toss out there.
I said Mike Tyson. I said Mike Tyson because I assume, and maybe we're still 3 or 4 seasons down the road from this happening, but I assume Serial is going to hit a total flop of a season eventually. They're going to have a story that doesn't hit.
Oh, it could be the next one.
It might even be. Yeah, you're right. With the same, it's not going to hit in the same way with the audience as that first season did. That was a magical moment, I think.
Think it was lightning in a bottle?
Yeah, and I don't know that you can do it a second time. But I think they've got a good shot. They've got a great team, as good a shot as any. At the bottom of that side of the bracket, it's WTF taking on Bionic Broadcast. I think we're both going to agree here. This is a shoe-in for Mark Maron. And I think even the guys at Bionic Broadcast might...
it's no shame to losing to Mark Maron.
No, not at all. Pretty much everybody does it if you're podcasting.
I agree 100% on both of those. Serial and WTF move forward for me.
Let's move up to Faculty of Horror taking on the Indoor Kids. The Indoor Kids, one of the ones I'm surprised. I don't know why I was. You said at the time that we reviewed it that it was one of your favorite shows.
Yeah.
Your wife loves it too.
Yeah.
Great video podcast there, the Indoor Kids. So who did you have move forward in your bracket?
I'm going to be surprised and say you're 100% wrong if you didn't pick the Indoor Kids.
I did pick the Indoor Kids,
okay.
Even in my own bracket. So you don't have any arguments there. I like Faculty of Horror quite a bit.
I thought this was a really interesting two to pick from.
It was. First of all, and we should say I didn't preface this episode in the appropriate way. I'll do it again at the end just to remind you guys, but I'll say here, this is all just for fun, obviously. You can't compare these shows one to another because they're in different subjects. They're with totally different hosts. Many of them have different formats. What we're doing is just for goofs and just our own personal opinions. But it is interesting to sort of make the choice, to have to go.
Very interesting.
We don't limit ourselves to one podcast. But many people do, or just 2, or just 3. They don't have the time for dozens and dozens every week and they're listening. And so many people are making these sorts of choices, even if they don't know that they are.
Right.
So that's the Indoor Kids winning over Faculty of Horror. The only other open spot in that bracket, still untitled, taking on Hello Internet. Hello Internet, I think, was a surprise for you being this high. I ranked it very high. I think it was about my 5th or 6th show.
Yeah, you did. I was surprised it was in your top 10.
I love it.
I wasn't surprised it was in your top 10, I guess.
I will say this about that show. I think it's one of those podcasts that will likely sort of wear out its welcome with me. I think, I'm not caught up completely yet. I'm still listening to the back catalog as I'm listening to new episodes from time to time. And so I think what'll happen eventually is I'll go on a binge. I'll listen to, 8 or 10 in a weekend. And then I'll be sort of done with that show. And maybe I'll listen slowly week to week. It'll be like the last thing I get to every week. And then I'll go 2 or 3 weeks in between. And then all of a sudden I'll have a bunch to listen to and I'll end up unsubscribing.
I really enjoyed Hello Internet. But I think this is the one where I picked comfort over adventure, I guess. So I picked Still Untitled.
And I'm not going to argue with you, so it'll move forward in our overall bracket.
Because I was going to say if Hello Internet moved forward, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, that's a toss-up. That can go either way.
Yeah.
Let's move to the bottom of the east side of the bracket, and we've got No Such Thing as a Fish in the 1 seed taking on The Last Gentleman. Good folks over there at The Last Gentleman, and actually Travis Langley, I'll mention real quick here as a listener feedback. He sent us an email. They've got some fairly outstanding guests coming up. Now, I believe the way that he worded that email made it sound like those were not to be announced yet, but he's got a really surprising string.
And I want to say, I love the way that this podcast has evolved because it was on a path to where it could be a not good show. Their first few episodes, while they're trying to figure things out and kind of figure out what kind of show they want to put out there, what kind of persona the guys should have, I think they hit kind of a transition point, and now that they're going down that line of evolution, and I'm really happy for them.
I agree 100%, but they're not going to beat No Such Thing as a Fish.
No.
It's your favorite podcast now, your number 1 overall ranked show, right?
Even if no one listened to this show, even if this is the last show that we did and all the work that we've put into it beforehand, if we stop doing the show today, I feel satisfied, fulfilled, and completed that we did this project just to find that podcast.
Hardcore History taking on Savage Lovecast.
Dude, this one was tough.
First of all, you couldn't have, I don't think, two more disparate shows.
Yes. Holy junk.
We talked about it at the time, but Dan Carlin's Hardcore History might be even a better sounding show than Mark Maron's WTF. It is perfectly recorded because it's just him. It's just him in front of a mic. And he's got such a great delivery. On the other hand, you got the Savage Lovecast, which features call-ins, which we know how I feel about that. So, interesting matchup here. Surprisingly, I think, for myself, I moved forward the Savage Lovecast over Hardcore History. I love Hardcore History, but first of all, it is, as we mentioned in our review, it is a meal, not an appetizer, not a sampler.
I agree.
So it's one of those things that I go to sparingly. He puts them out sparingly. First of all, they're far in between, so it's not something that you can stay subscribed to this and it's never going to overwhelm your feed, But at the same time, Dan Savage is putting out a tremendous amount of content, and it's just very enjoyable. And I've surprised myself by how many more of those I've listened to even after our review was done. So I move forward with the Savage Lovecast.
I think this one was close. I think it was probably the closest matchup, but I move forward Hardcore History, dude, and that's the one I want us to move forward with.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you. Okay. He is an award-winning. That's an amazing podcast. I mean, Dan Savage is as well, but Hardcore History deserves all of the accolades that it's had piled on it. All right, let's go to Star Talk Radio taking on Not a Real Job. You actually have Not a Real Job ranked higher in your list than I have it in mine, and I think that just comes down to you running out of shows that aren't internet shows to put in your teens. But I like this show a lot. It is one that I listen to every week. And as a matter of fact, I surprised myself again here because as much as I love Star Talk, I have not maintained a subscription to Star Talk, and I have maintained a subscription to Not a Real Job. I moved forward Not a Real Job on my own.
I did too.
No way!
Yes!
That is surprising, my friends. All right. And I didn't feel too bad about that.
And I want to say I gave Star Talk a 2. Like, it's a good show.
Yeah,
if
I think we
that's something
both
you're
did.
interested in, it's a great show.
But it's not on our list of topics.
It's hard to relate to. It's hard to form a relationship with.
You know what? This is a problem only for someone who listens to as many shows as I do. I find it hard to find a transitional show to get into Star Talk. I don't have anything that's remotely like Star Talk to warm my way from one of my other shows to it. I end up a lot making podcast playlists so that I go from show to show in a pleasing sort of conversational fashion.
You feng shui your shows.
I do very much so. And Star Talk doesn't fit. It doesn't fit anywhere in there. So I have to be in the mood for Star Talk all on its own and go directly to it. And it just doesn't come up that much. So there you go. Great show, but it has fallen in our March Madness.
Now let me ask you, did a little part of you move Not a Real Job forward because you thought I would pick Star Talk?
Maybe, like it wouldn't cost me anything, but also, like again, that's you and I talked about it. In all of these brackets, there's at least one matchup that's like really, that's really,
yeah.
I feel a little torn there either way. I will say this, it's much more likely that Joel and Chris, the guys behind Not a Real Job, listen to this versus Neil deGrasse Tyson. So there could be the home field advantage, so to speak, that gave them the win here. But whatever it was, I decided Not a Real Job was
I did too.
The show I was moving forward.
And I think for me, that's what it was, is I can relate with these guys. I can follow their journey. I can form that relationship. And to me, that's more important than interesting or wonderful, because Star Talk is both of those things. It's interesting, it's wonderful, it's a fantastic show, but it's not one I can feel with.
All right, let's move to the final open bracket. Stuff you should know in the one spot, taking on Rob Has a Podcast. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that while some, well, not in our audience, but some in somebody's audience might disagree with us, I'm going to say that Stuff You Should Know wins this one handily in our combined bracket. Do you have anything to add to that?
Stuff You Should Know moved forward in my bracket as well.
Okay, Stuff You Should Know moves forward. And moving to the top of that bracket, What Say You takes on Bizarre States. Bizarre States from the Nerdist Industries, sort of like Blurry Photos. We talked about it, I think, in that same Listener Appreciation Month. While we both enjoyed it and enjoyed the idea in general, we liked even the host. For some reason, the whole thing didn't hang together nearly as well.
Yeah, it was... missing some, I don't know what, there was something missing on that show.
I like Jessica, it's Jessica Shabbat, I think, is the host there. I like her a lot in the Nerdist videos. They do like the little 3-minute like news updates, geek news updates or whatever.
I'm sure that has nothing to do with that. She's pretty attractive.
Well, you don't even see her for a lot of it. Like it's graphics or whatever going by. It's just her voice. Mm-hmm. Maybe I like her in smaller bites. Whatever. What Say You moves on. We love the What Say You guys. All right.
It's okay to be a nuggalo.
Yeah, that's right. A nuggalo. Reply All and the BS Report. In my bracket, surprisingly, Reply All moves forward. I have not maintained my interest in the BS Report. Part of that...
Maybe you didn't. Maybe you didn't, sir. Maybe you didn't. But let me ask you this. If there wasn't a show like BS Report, would you have even made it to Reply All?
Probably not. I mean, well, I don't know if that's
Without
true.
Without that show grabbing your interest and making you want to explore the world of podcasting, because I know for a fact it was one of the first shows that you listened to.
It was. It was very, very early on.
Because that show was so good, because that show captured your imagination, because that show opened up a world of podcasting to you, you're now just going to toss it aside?
No, I'm going to move it forward in the bracket because I'm sure you voted for it.
Oh, yeah, it was going forward regardless.
And the final matchup in this side of the bracket, the Adam Carolla Show and the Get It Done Guys, quick and dirty tips to do more and...
To make more and do less.
Yes, there you go. So we've got the Adam Carolla Show versus the Get It Done Guy. Going into this, I had Adam Carolla Show ranked higher, I think. I'm pretty sure. And if you would have asked me 2 days ago which I liked better, I would have said the Adam Carolla Show. But as I'm working on this bracket, I'm like, I think the Get It Done Guy needs to move forward.
Yeah, I moved Get It Done Guy forward too. I still listen to the Adam Carolla Show. Like, I'm still subscribed. I still listen. But these little microcasts, shows that are less than 10 minutes, I'm like, they're like, like the old Lay's potato chip ad. Like, I bet you can't eat just one. It's kind of that. They're kind of addicting.
We talk a lot about like the podcast long tail, like having a catalog that's evergreen. And like when we talk about a certain show, we're like, this show isn't really relevant week to week necessarily. So you can go back. If you enjoy this, you can go back and listen to this whole big catalog. You got 150 episodes already to listen to or whatever. This is a perfect example of that. If you have one of these shows where it's like 7-minute episodes, 10-minute episodes, and now you've put out 2 a week for 3 or 4 years before somebody finds your show. What a treasure chest of, I've got hundreds of episodes that are applicable to me, and I could listen to every single one of them, and I wouldn't even spend that much time on it comparatively to the hour and 30 minutes of a WTF.
It's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Sometimes you open that briefcase and there's only $1 in it. Sometimes you open a briefcase and there's $1 million.
So it just occurred to me, Josh, we left out one matchup from the bracket with No Such Thing as a Fish. We did not talk about Pauly Shore's Interested versus Welcome to Night Vale.
Oh, I didn't really want to talk about this one.
Yeah, it breaks your heart, huh?
Yeah.
I moved forward Night Vale. I enjoy Pauly Shore's Interested, but I talked in our review about the issues that I had with it. The overlapping conversations, I don't feel like he's at a point yet as an interviewer where he can handle it. And to me, Night Vale, the production is already from episode 1. It was solid. It didn't have to grow. Here's the thing:
I don't think Pauly Shore Interested is going to move forward. I don't think there's going to be new episodes. I think Pauly Shore is there a podcast network, Podcast One? Does that sound familiar?
Yes, Pauly Shore is on it, and Rob Has a Podcast is on it.
Right, but I think Pauly Shore's starting a new, I don't think he's carrying over Pauly Shore's Interested onto that. I think he's coming up with a whole new format.
Oh, really?
I think. I could be wrong. I've been known to be wrong before, but I believe that's right.
Interesting.
So that's really what kind of informed my decision. I think I still stand by this. At the end of podcasting, I think Welcome to Night Vale will be an epic story.
I agree wholeheartedly. All right, and that moves into our Sweet 16. We've got Mabimba Bam versus The Weekly Planet, Art of Manliness versus Stuff You Missed in History Class, What Say You versus The BS Report, Get It Done Guy versus Stuff You Should Know, No Such Thing as a Fish taking on Not a Real Job, Hardcore History versus Night Vale, Indoor Kids versus WTF, and the Still Untitled Podcast versus the Serial Podcast. Where do you want to start? You want to start with Mabimba Bam, Stuff You Should Know, No Such Thing as a Fish, or Serial?
Start with Mabimba Bam.
All right, Mabimba Bam taking on The Weekly Planet, my boys from down under. I love The Weekly Planet.
I know you do.
And I
don't dislike The Weekly Planet.
This hurt me. It hurt me bad. But on my personal bracket, I let the McElroy brothers sit here at the Sweet 16, and I moved forward Wikipedia Brown and Nick Mason.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. Or Wikipedia Brown and Mr. Sunday Movies. I moved forward the Weekly Planet podcast. I did.
Wow.
Let me tell you something. In my bracket, they go all the way to the championship round, my friend. I'm assuming that that's not going to be the case, and that you would stand and make a.
Neither of these make it to my championship round.
Really?
Yeah. But I would move Mabimba Bam forward. In fact, I did.
Yeah, we've got to make Mabimba Bam move forward here. That goes to Art of Manliness taking on Stuff You Missed in History Class. For me, this was a no-brainer. Stuff You Missed in History Class.
I went Art of Manliness.
How strongly do you feel about it?
Here's why.
Okay.
And this isn't fair, and I don't care. Stuff You Should Know makes it pretty far in my bracket. Had to cut some of that away.
Two from the same network. You couldn't handle it?
Yeah.
All right.
Plus, I really do. I really enjoy Art of Manliness. Like, I enjoy them both. Like, I don't want to take anything away from the Art of Manliness by saying that that's how, I got to that point. But it's the fact that they were so close that small thing is what determined it.
All right. So I'll go ahead and allow the Art of Manliness to pass through on that one. And they make it to the Elite Eight. So now let's move down.
I feel so good about that win.
Let's move down to Stuff You Should Know, since you mentioned them. Stuff You Should Know taking on the Get It Done guy. And I got to tell you, I thought long and hard even about this one, because here's the thing. Stuff You Should Know is, like I mentioned earlier with Hello Internet, what happens with it for me, right now I'm going week to week. I'm listening to every episode pretty much as it comes out, or at least within a day or two, so that I've only got maybe 2 or 3 at a time. If I let it stack up, though, all of a sudden I go, there's too much good stuff. I'm overwhelmed with it. I can't. And I'll stop listening altogether for a while. I'll go cold for several months, and then I'll go back and I'll listen to the most interesting episodes that I missed.
Yeah, I just cherry pick. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's not going to happen, I don't think, with the Get It Done guy, because the episodes are so brief. So I thought about moving him forward, but I can't. It's got to be Stuff You Should Know, right?
Yeah, I moved forward Stuff You Should Know, and I man, if I had more time on my hands and I could edit something myself, if I could produce something myself, which I can't, I would love to do a Stuff You Know spoof, like release an episode that they release the exact same episode they released just a day later, but get everything wrong.
Just lie
yes,
for 45 minutes.
Just get everything wrong.
Convincingly, congenially, incorrect information.
Yes.
Stuff you should not tell anyone else.
Yeah,
because it's not true. Yeah. So then we've got What Say You taking on the BS Report. In my bracket, of course, the BS Report didn't make it out of the first round, but even in this matchup, I think I would still take What Say You. I got to tell you, that I Have Your Pants episode, even it's sort of like you said with us finding No Such Thing as a Fish.
Yeah.
Me turning you on to podcasts, if it didn't do anything else, you went out and found the I Have Your Pants episode, and you brought that to me.
Yeah.
It's like a highlight of my life. It's that funny. So
it's probably it is definitely my single favorite episode. Out of all the podcasts we have on here, and out of every episode of every podcast I've ever listened to, it's probably the singularly my favorite. I'm not going to say the best, but it's my favorite.
There might be a Mabim Bam episode that tops it, but I don't know what it would be. I can't think of a single one that
it doesn't
I laughed.
Stick right.
I mean, I've listened to that episode. Personally, I've listened to it, I think, 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, I think I've listened to it 3 times.
Every time, laughed out loud, like almost like needed to go to the bathroom, laughed out loud so hard, Okay.
Because you know it, like, you're listening to the story, and you're like, this is a person telling a story. There's no way this happened, or this is a person fantasizing. And the whole time, it did happen. Like, this happened.
Yeah, that's that guy.
Oh, man.
So that puts What Say You up against Stuff You Should Know in the Elite Eight. Let's move over to the East bracket. We've got Serial facing the Still Untitled podcast. You and I both like Adam Savage. But
Serial, yeah.
Yeah, they slay the Still Untitled podcast, and no need to discuss that there. Indoor Kids taking on WTF. This is gonna kill you, isn't it?
No. Like I like Indoor Kids a lot, but I love WTF.
And Mark Maron remains.
And I subscribe to both. I listen to both. Like.
Yeah. Mark Maron remains undefeated there. Hardcore History taking on Night Vale.
Oh, here's this. Here's a hole. I didn't even fill this one out. It's a hole in my bracket because I didn't care who won, because the person, the podcast they were going against was going to win.
Oh.
So I chose not to vote.
You're just going to abstain? All right, I'm going to move Hardcore History forward.
Okay, then I'm going to move Welcome to Night Vale.
Okay.
Night Vale. I always say Val.
And then that means Not a Real Job taking on No Such Thing as a Fish at the bottom. And again, I love Joel. I love Chris.
It's where this Cinderella story comes to an end.
The QI elves, though, No Such Thing as a Fish, one of the funniest shows out there, and just so enjoyable, so enjoyable. I have not turned Kelly onto that yet.
I mean, look,
but I will.
Here's the deal. That No Such Thing as a Fish and Not a Real Job. It's like a 5-on-2 street fight. You know what I'm saying?
It's just an ugly beatdown. You feel sorry for the other guy at the end of it.
Yeah, like it doesn't matter how great of a fighter you are. Those five are going to take you down every time.
Well, let's start right there and go back around. No Such Thing as a Fish and the Elite Eight taking on Hardcore History. I love Dan Carlin.
No Such Thing as a Fish.
No Such Thing as a Fish goes right on to the championship, or not to the championship round, but to the Final Four. Let's go up to the top of that bracket. WTF taking on Serial.
I want to see what you say about this one.
I said Serial, and to me, it's not close. I love WTF.
No, I disagree. What has Serial done besides one season?
Serial has brought 80 million people to podcasting.
Yeah, who knows how many Mark Mann will eventually bring to podcasting?
Eventually. Serial did it in
eventually
2 months.
Because he's going to stay around.
And that is
three seasons deep. Serial may not even be a thing anymore. It may have ran its course. You can't put something that you know is only going to last 3 seasons over something that is an icon and has been carrying the load.
Oh, wow, you're right. You just talked me out of it. I can't believe you did that. But you're right. You're right. If we look back in 10 years to this first March Madness podcasting bracket,
Serial will be a very, very bright spot on the graph. Huge, enormously bright spot. But it could be all that it is.
But WTF is like the Bob Dylan of podcasting.
I'm just saying, if I've got to get from point A from point B, I'll take a dimmer light as long as it gets me there.
All right. Fair enough. Let's move to the other side then. We got What Say You taking on Stuff You Should Know. This one will hurt you too, huh?
This one hurt me real bad.
I'm going to say Stuff You Should Know, and I'm going to do it
consistency.
For the exact same reasons that you said, pretty much. The What Say You guys won't, they don't stick with it. Their schedules don't allow. They have not committed to it as a priority. The Stuff You Should Know,
Look,
guys,
I'm not going to say they're not committed
to
it as a priority because I think in their busy schedule they're doing as much as they can. But that inconsistency is what knocks it out here for me.
Art of Manliness taking on Mabim Mabam, and I will hear no arguments here.
I moved Mabim Mabam forward on my bracket.
That's right. That's the end of that Cinderella story, my friend. All right, so now our final four: Mabim Mabam versus Stuff You Should Know, WTF versus No Such Thing as a Fish.
I feel like the left side of the bracket is more for you, and the right side of the bracket is more for me.
Maybe. I feel like they're great matchups on both sides, and it's just, here's the winner before we get to crowning a champion here.
The audience.
Yeah, man, because guess how much all of these shows cost?
Nothing.
Not a damn thing, and I'm going to leave that one in. I'm going to say it again, as a matter of fact, not a thing. I'll beep that one because, there we go. We've got one for each of you. But listen, man, it's free. All of this stuff is free. And if you've got a friend that has a smartphone, an Android or an iPhone or a Windows phone or anything, and they don't listen to podcasts, you got to tell them you're missing out, man. Go figure out what their interests are, and you do the heavy lifting for them. Find a show to suggest for them and help them find this massive amount of free entertainment that's available to them.
Yeah. You don't have to bring a friend to our show, but bring a friend to a show.
Amen. That's the slogan. Bring a friend to a show. Exactly. All right, so let's go ahead and punch some of our beloveds here. Mabim Mabam versus Stuff You Should Know. I'll start with my babies first.
Hey, I want to say that this is my side of the bracket came out to be this.
Did you really?
Yeah, my bracket did.
I ended up with, I've got on mine the Weekly Planet versus Stuff You Should Know, actually, and I put the Weekly Planet through the championship round in my personal bracket. I agree with you that Mabim Mabam actually needs to go in the overall bracket, and Stuff You Should Know definitely deserves their place. Of the two of them, I would rather, if I'm talking about Desert Island, it's got to be Mabim Mabam over Josh and Chuck. It's close.
No. That's the worst analogy you could possibly use to move Mabim Mabam forward. Are you going to learn how to make a fire from those guys? No, you're probably not. You might from stuff you should know. Are you going to know how you should arrange your coconut shells so that it's in feng shui with your fire pit? No.
Are you going to learn how to charge your iPhone
Are
so
you
you
learn,
can listen
since
to your
you're on a desert
podcast?
island, you're going to have a lot of fish? Are you going to learn how to make sushi yourself or what sushi is? You're not. If you're on a desert island, there's no way in hell you take Mabima Bam. You take stuff you should know all day, every day.
Is that who you moved forward?
It is.
Stuff you should know. You know what? I'm not going to argue with you. It's close, and we've praised the brothers McElroy ad nauseum, but
Look,
Josh and Chuck deserve it.
I'm going to say you may have won this one if you hadn't have picked the absolute worst analogy you possibly could.
Very good point. Very good point. I thought as soon as I had it out of my mouth, I realized you were right, of course. So let's move to the other side of the bracket. WTF versus no such thing as a fish.
Oh, man, that's exactly what's on my personal bracket.
Yeah, I had cereal versus no such thing as a fish. You definitely had the personal bracket that stood the test of time, I think.
It didn't match all the way through. So I kind of eased up on the ones that I knew weren't going to make it further, and I let you win those.
You just ride you just rode your thoroughbreds in.
Yeah, I argued for them hard when I had to.
All right, so this one's close for me. I moved. Well, in my side of the bracket, it was actually cereal or no such thing as a fish, and I moved cereal forward, and it was for the. I know. It was for the same reason that you sort of argued against. In my mind, it was this moment in time, this singular event, and it will be remembered for all time. But you're right. If they don't come back, if it doesn't last, if there's not 3, 4, 5, 10 years worth of.
Well, that's what, when you come out of the gate that strong and set those expectations. It's always, even if season 2 is great, and odds are it will be.
There's a long way to fall.
Right.
Whereas Mark Maron's just adding to his audience.
Exactly.
Year after year after year. So with that in mind, I'm assuming that you put WTF ahead of no such thing as a fish.
No.
Really?
Really.
No such thing as a fish, even over your beloved Mark Maron.
Yes. Yeah. Let me tell you, man, it is 100% delightful. The only thing I would say negative about this show, and it's the same problem with any show that has more than, say, 2 hosts, is sometimes it gets a little money by stepping on each other. But other than that, it combines everything I love. Useless facts and puns.
I worry about this. This is a podcast based off of a TV show. One wonders, do they all remain in connection with one another? Does the podcast continue even if the show does not? If QI goes away or loses in prominence to such a degree that this staff is not together, then does the podcast continue? And if not, then does this matter in 5 or 6 years?
So BBC shows are notorious for only being 2, maybe 3 seasons.
Game show's a little different, though.
Right.
Game shows will last 50 years.
Right.
Become an institution. All right. You know what? I'm okay with that. I'm going to allow it. So here we go. The championship round, my friend. Stuff you should know with Josh and Chuck versus no such thing as a fish with the QI elves from Quite Interesting. It's got to be stuff you should know.
I knew you were going to say that, and here's my counter argument. To me, for me personally, coming across no such thing as a fish is the epitome of why we do this show. You've never heard of it before.
No?
You knew stuff you should know.
I did.
So for me, no such thing as a fish is exactly what our vision for this show is. It could be it's my totem for Pod on Pod.
Well, the Weekly Planet didn't get to go, so fie on you, I say. No, I don't know. It's awfully close. You make a valiant argument for it, and you're right in that one of our stated goals is to expose people to underknown, underappreciated, underrecognized podcasts. Our other goal, though, is to make sure.
I'm sure there's listeners out there laughing, and they're like, guys, it was only unknown to you.
Yes, yeah, sure. Our other goal, though, or one of our other goals, is to make sure that anybody that's new to podcasting knows who the big dogs are, knows who the prime examples of excellent podcasting work are. And I don't think anybody other than maybe Mark Maron and WTF deserves to be at the top of that heap other than Josh and Chuck and Stuff You Should Know and the guys from HowStuffWorks.com. It doesn't hurt, of course, that a big portion of our audience came from their audience too, so I'm sure this will be a popular choice among our listeners. But I think they should be there. I think if you're making
that's fine. I'm not changing. I'm not moving on this opinion, and you don't have to move on it either.
All right, there we go. So we'll just leave it at that. What we would love to do next year, though, is we'd love to open this up and expand it. If you guys enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed the idea of running this down and coming up with the overall winner, or who we thought was the overall winner of podcasting this year at least, let us know. Send us some feedback. Talk to us at podonpod@teamprocreate.com. Talk to us on Facebook, facebook.com/podonpod, or on Twitter at podonpod. You can find us at all of those places.
You know what we should do? Let's let the listeners decide. They may not agree with our whole brackets. Who won, who didn't win, that's fine. But in our championship, we have Stuff You Should Know and No Such Thing as a Fish. We're going to cap this
with a poll. We can put up a poll on the website. I'll get Rob and Jeremy to put up a poll on the site. We can do that. So if you go to podonpod.com, and we'll also tweet links for this during the week too. But go take our poll and tell us which one is your champion. Stuff You Should Know or No Such Thing as a Fish. And if you haven't checked out No Such Thing as a Fish yet, and you're our regular listener, this should be your example, your final notice. That's definitely a show you got to tune into.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a couple of shows like that, like Mabim Mabam. I feel like is a show like that for us. If you haven't listened to it, give it a try. You might need to give it 3 tries.
But there's something there.
Yes.
Yeah. 2 Pod on Pod hosts can't be wrong.
Yes, we can.
Hey, speaking of, before we wrap up, I just want to remind everybody, thanks for sticking with us through this nonsense. And this was just for fun. Obviously, these shows can't be compared. It's different formats. It's different recording styles. It's different genres and different topics, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of fun for us to sort of line them up against each other and just make the hard choices, so to speak, as we try
Except we didn't at the end.
Yeah, except we didn't make the hardest choice. We left that up to you guys. Anyway, you need to tune in again next week for a new review. We're going to start our next batch of reviews. And what are we starting with, Josh?
How did this get made?
It's one that's been requested a lot, actually, since early on. It's an Earwolf podcast. I think only our second or maybe third Earwolf podcast. I know we did
definitely our second.
Sklarbros.
Maybe our third.
Yeah, I think it was just Sklarbro and this one. I think this will be the second.
We did county and country, so I guess it depends on which one you want to.
Yeah, if you count those as 2 shows. All right, so here we go. We'll be back next week with How Did This Get Made? Until then, we've been your hosts.
I'm Josh.
I'm Joel. And these were all the podcasts.
There's only 24 hours in a day. I got a pair of earbuds and I wish there was a way that I could know just what I want to listen to. There's 150,000 shows that I'm not sitting through. When the world is dark and boring, let us do your exploring. Pod on pod. Pod on pod. Are you wanting something funny? Are you wanting something smart? A show on astral projection or the history of art? Do you want to learn a language or how to play guitar? Just leave it up to Joel and Josh. Pod on pod. Pod on pod.
Pod on Pod is a proud member of the Procast Network, a Procreate production. Procreate is a community of artists in film, music, the digital arts, and the fine arts that helps them connect and collaborate on projects. You can find out more at teamprocreate.com. Also be sure to check out one of our other great shows like Movie Buzzed. The Movie Buzzed podcast is exactly what it sounds like. It's a place for friends to get together, watch a good movie, and catch a good buzz. Every episode, your host Zach will be joined by a special guest or 5 to have some fun. Whether it's pop culture, movie trivia, random rants about politics, or reading comments from astrophysicists, Movie Buzzed is where you'll find your friends and a good buzz waiting for you.